Hello, everybody, and welcome to this quick explanation on strings and numbers. The first thing we're going to learn about computer science and programming is a concept that you might heard before, which is variables. And even though we're not going to see all the variables today, I just want to talk about two variables that I believe are very important, which is strings and numbers, okay? Strings and numbers. Now, a variable is just a place in memory or an allocated memory. It's just a place in memory of the computer that stores information. Now, remember that when we were talking about information, there are many types of information. Remember that it's basically bits and bytes, okay? But those bytes can represent different type of information. For example, remember when we talked about the ASCII code? We talked about the ASCII code being a character. So a string as we know it, let's say the string, it's basically formed by a string or a concatenated way of putting characters. Okay, that's why we call it a string of characters, which are, you already know many of them. And a character is just a symbol, the ones that we know. So a character can be A character can be B, C, D. It can also be the @ symbol, right? It can also be exclamation mark. It can also be question mark. And it can also be even a number as we know it as a character, okay, or a symbol. Now, a string of characters can always be called or can be placed into a variable called string. So let's say I have the word dog. Now, the word dog is just the combination of D-O-G, 3 characters. Now, the 3 characters can be placed into a variable called a string variable, okay? So I'm going to call string A equals dog. Now, this way of writing, it's different from the one that we're going to use in Thunkable. This is just a simple way to call it in Java, but we're going to learn every single language has a different syntax. This is in Java. In Python, it's very simple. You just put the letter that you want, the variable that you want to create, and just put the information. Okay? Now, that is about strings. Okay? So remember, strings are just a portion of characters put together that form a word or form a phrase. Remember that the space is also a character. So spaces are also included into the string. Now, let's talk about numbers. Now, numbers is another way of variables, or it's another type of variable, and they have different types, okay? Now, we're going to learn later on that numbers have integers, which is integer values, so it's type integers. There's another one called doubles that we can use with decimals. There are others that are called floats, so it's another way of representing numbers. But basically, a number is just an integer number or a decimal. Okay, so basically we just have integers and we have decimals, okay? So remember, an integer number is just a number from -infinite all the way to infinite and does not have decimals. So let's say -5, -4, blah, 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 0, and then 1 all the way to infinity, right? Positive. Now, decimals are also a part. Now, the resolution of the decimal is the one that takes into place the amount of bits and bytes. So I can have a decimal, and we talked about this in Unit 1, that I can have a decimal, let's say 1.3, and this will take an amount of bytes, but what if I have 1.35, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc.? This will take an enormous amount of bytes, okay? So what we do in some occasions is that, for example, doubles do not allocate all the decimal numbers. It actually has a certain number of bits and bytes that can hold. So basically, we're talking about integers and decimals. This is another way of storing information. The good thing about having variables as numbers is that you can do operations. What are the operations? The basic operations, of course, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And there are other operations really interesting we're going to see later on, which is remainder. And we have another operation, which is absolute value, etc. So we have all the operations in math that we can use with integers and decimals. Okay? Now with Thunkable, we're going to see that we are not going to need to discriminate if it's a string or a number. The programming language will understand, or will kind of like guess if it's a number or if it's a string. It doesn't happen the same in Java or in other programming languages. Okay, so just as an example, on this, underneath this activity, you will see a link that you can open, and it's going to be this app. It's already with the labels, with the text input, and it also has the blocks that I'm going to show you how to code. So basically, what I just did is that I just dragged and dropped just a few labels. So I'm going to just drag and drop labels, the label one, and then drag and drop the text input, which is also here. And then I do two of them, and then at the end, I just put a button, and then I just put a label. In order to change the name, remember that it's very simple. You just click on the object, and you just change the text that appears here. The same with the second label, enter your name, enter your age, and then finally on the button, I also change the name of the button to submit. Now this little app is very, very simple. Here you're going to type in your name, you're going to type in your age, and at the end is going to concatenate the different numbers and the word. So let's say I'm going to put in Peter, and then enter the age as 25. And then when I click submit, the program is going to get Peter, put it in a variable, like I just said, in a string variable. Then he's going to get the 25, put it into an integer variable, also a variable. And then he's going to join that information into a complete string, which is Peter is 25 years old. It's as simple as this, okay? So it's not a lot, but here we are going to talk about how to store information inside a variable, which is going to help you do a lot. Okay, so this is very simple. You can see a lot of blocks, but it's basically very, very simple code. So the first thing with every program that you create is that you want to initialize variables. Now the variables are on the variable palette, because it has a little color here. So if you go to variables, you can see initialize app. Now, when you go to initialize app, you got to change for the name that you want. Remember that a variable can have any name, okay? And that name is not the information stored. It's just an ID for the variable. So first I'm going to initialize the variable name to nothing, to an empty space. Now, quotation marks are very important because it allows the program to know that it's a string variable. So everything that is inside quotations, it's a string variable, okay? Then we initialize another type of variable, and we initialize it to a number. Now, if you go to math, you can see that there are blocks that are related with numbers. So in this case, I just grab the 0 and I initialize it to 0. So at this point in the program, name doesn't have anything, and age just has a 0. That usually happens before we actually run the program. Then I'm going to say, okay, what is the button going to do? So I'm going to go down and click on button 1, and I see all the options for button. So when button 1 clicks, it's going to do this. Okay, this is the code that allows us to play with or interact with the application. Like, what does a button do? So button 1 click, and then that's the first function. It says set app name to, and it's going to get the information from the text input and store it in name. Now, the second thing is get the information from the second text input and also store it in age. Now, at this point of the program, name has whatever was on the text input, and H has the other part of the text input. Finally, I need to join. And joining in computer science can be in different ways. Sometimes you concatenate strings, you concatenate numbers, and basically it's just a text function. So you click on text and you go to join, and you can join different strings, okay? So you can join different strings. Now at this point, I say label 3, this is the one that I want to work on, label 3, set text to join, and then join what? My app name, which is the variable, and I can go to variables and I can see it right here in app name, and then go to join another string because the function only has 2 parameters, so I need another join in order to put 3 parameters, and I say, okay, whatever is the app name is, and then I join app age years old. So this would be the solution to this code, which is very simple, and it just concatenates. In the next activity, we're actually going to do a little bit of operations with math.